Gang stalking or paranoid schizophrenia.
Mind reading.
Communication system and method including brainwave analysis and or use of brain activity. This is getting right into the sci-fi. Filed in 1998, a system and method for enabling human beings to communicate by way of their monitored brain activity. The brain activity of an individual is monitored and transmitted to a remote location. Example, by satellite. At this remote location, the monitored brain activity is compared with pre-recorded normalized brain activity curves, waveforms, or patterns to determine if a match or a substantial match is found. If such a match is found, then the computer at the remote location determines that the individual was attempting to communicate the word or the phrase or the thought that is corresponding to the match stored normalization signal. Again, we're talking about mind reading with this waveform technology.
Dr. Rowney Kilda.
That they can read everybody's thoughts, dreams, and subconscious and influence them. And some people say, well, I don't care if somebody reads my thoughts, but you don't realize then that you can be influenced to be a serial killer, commit suicide, become a criminal, and this is what the false flag operations are about.
Finally, we have the apparatus and the method for remotely monitoring and altering brain waves. Here is an apparatus and a method for censoring brain waves at a position remote from a subject, whereby electromagnetic signals of different frequencies are simultaneously transmitted to the brain of the subject, in which the signal interference with one another, they interfere with one another to yield a waveform which is modulated by the subject's brain waves. The interference waveform, which is representative of the brain wave activity, is retransmitted by the brain to a receiver where it is demodulated and amplified. The demodulated waveform is then displayed for visual viewing, and it's routed to a computer for further processing and analysis. So we're quite literally talking about taking the image from off your brain and putting it onto a computer screen so they can analyze what's going on in our heads. This is unbelievable.
Then they have brainwave analysis, remote neural monitoring, and electronic brain linking via satellites. Madrisson in 1991 invented this patent, and it is to read the minds of targets, terrorize and oppress completely yet covertly.
Voice to skull, V2K.
Apparatus for audibly communicating speech using the radio frequency hearing effect. Now we're getting into transmitting voices directly into people's heads. A modulation process with a fully suppressed carrier and input processor filtering to produce an encoded output. For amplitude modulation and audio speech processor filtering. Intelligible subjective sound is produced when the encoded signal is demodulated using the RF hearing effect. So again, they've got diagrams here explaining exactly how this can be done. We're talking about putting speech through various frequencies being decoded by the human brain as an actual voice.
There's nothing crazy about it, even if...
So can you expand on that exactly?
Well, like telepathy.
Yeah.
You know, the thing with mind control is very bad because they call it synthetic telepathy. They can induce thoughts in you. They can induce voices in your head. And of course, voices in your head, that you're crazy, you know. They can do that, and they have done that from, at least officially, from the Iraqi First War. They gave orders to soldiers straight into their head. Of course, they were guinea pigs.
American soldiers?
American, yeah, right. And if this technology...
Did they use it on the enemy as well?
Yes, in a way, because I always remember I was so shocked when I saw a picture when soldiers came from bunkers, Iraqi soldiers. They had bunkers and about 3-yard walls, you know. They had drinks and food for 6 months. Americans had sent helicopters above and they had Arabic-speaking interpreters who spoke Arabic to them, and they were sending with microwaves orders to come out. They were being mind controlled, and all of a sudden, all the guys came out with no reason at all. Nobody attacked physically. It was just done with mind control.
Then they have the neurophone of Patrick Flanagan to make the target hear voices via laser, via microwaves, radiation, wave direction of sound that's being converted to electrical impulse to go straight to the target's brain. So, hearing voices is not a sign of mental illness necessarily. You have to consider that it can be a military technology. And this is the greatest, I would say, insult to medical doctors, that we are not taught this. No medical doctors generally know of military technology that you can, with synthetic telepathy, make people hear voices in their heads. And it can be proven by Blue Mouse. I had exchanged some emails with Elton Byrd before he died, and he was a Navy scientist who was engaged in these technologies. And he said that the Blue Mouse is world's most sensitive microphone. If somebody says, I hear voices in my head, so you put the Blue Mouse onto the skull of this person. And this microphone, Blue Mouse, takes the words, the sentences that the person hears, and everybody in the same room can hear it. So it is not a sign of mental illness. It is military action towards this person with electromagnetic fields and electromagnetic beams, radiation. And of course it's criminal. But this can be absolutely proven. But how many know of Blue Mouse? Very few, I would say.
Alex Jones and Dr. John Hall.
The brain has no firewall.
The brain has no firewall. You can put voices in the head. For those of you listening that think that's an impossibility, go to audiospotlight.com. You can purchase a unit yourself to put voices in somebody's head. And for people who don't believe it, we've got early affidavits, 5 prisoners from the Utah State Prison who described accurately being put in cells, having electromagnetic energy placed in those cells that was so intense that they couldn't stand up. Several of them even said that they could tell that they were hearing voices in their heads of the perpetrators, of the people doing the research, and that they could tell that the voices were responding to their thoughts. Some of them thought it was subvocalization, that they were just responding.
But really, they've got a computer reading it out the other side. Keep going.
Well, exactly. And like I said, some of them thought it was subvocalization. We have technology now where they can put a monitor on your throat, pick up the nerve transmissions from your auditory center of the brain to the larynx, and for people that have had their arms blown off in war, can control a phone or can control a computer or control an apparatus by speech. Well, it's not really speech that they're picking up; it's the electric transmission coming from the auditory center, or the auditory center to the larynx. This technology, at least based on some of the people I know, connections that I have that worked on it, is actually using the brain. All of this manipulation is being done at the brain level.
Microchips.
We are working in Belgium with victims there. We're allowed to go over there with victims and use a Faraday cage to do some scanning with some of the victims that appear to be chipped, and did some great studies in a Faraday cage where we put victims that are hearing voices and claiming to be chipped next to a control who's never complained of this. The victim was positive for transmissions. The control was not, in a Faraday cage.
Interesting. What does that mean?
Faraday cage is a cage that...
No, I know what it is, but...
It means that these people are transmitting, and some of them are chipped. Some of the chips can be as simple as a Verichip.
Well, they have biochips that are actually liquid now, too. And they're coming out with all the pills are going to have tracker chips in them.
Paranoid schizophrenia, delusion, psychosis.
Now, we have the author of A New Breed, Satellite Terrorism in America. He's a medical doctor, anesthesiologist, also has a degree in biology and science from the University of Texas. And he's also, again, an author, satweapons.com. And I was told by Dr. Bob Bowman before he died, he's been on air about this, that they were working on systems, basically a radiation gun that could target and hit somebody, and you die 6 months later. You get real sick but not know what happened. And basically high-powered, nuclear-powered microwaves. So we know this is going on. We're not saying everybody that thinks this is happening, it's really happening. Okay, but the point is this stuff exists, and we're going to break. You're with us for the balance of the hour, Dr. John Hall of San Antonio. You got like 2 minutes till we go to break. What do you think, knowing what you ran into and what your book's about with this, with your patients and friends and people, and thinking it wasn't true because I've seen you on news in San Antonio and then discovering stuff, what does this look to you with this constellation of info we've got with this Alexis guy?
Well, on the side of right, you have that grace of God, I guess, with you when you know you're doing the right thing. And the right thing's not always the easiest thing. Like I told you, I never in a million years planned on being the one of the spearheads.
Now, you were telling me that during the break. How did you, it just like, wow, it just got, and now you've learned more and more about it.
Well, after the book came out and I had, thousands of other victims come forward and say, thank you for putting a book out on it and using whatever, cred that I have with having a couple of initials behind my name. Not that that's any big thing, but the one thing that I was happy that the book did is I had a lot of families call me and say, we have a son that's been complaining about hearing voices and complaining of, government surveillance. We've had him to 5 different psychiatrists. They've shocked him. They've had him on meds. It never goes away. Now we have a little better understanding about maybe what he's dealing with, and if that had only happened once, it would have been worth having wrote the book. It's happened hundreds of times where people have actually, let psychiatrists do electroconvulsive therapy on loved ones that were voicing these complaints. Now we're kind of going toward an educational campaign. We need to educate at least local psychiatrists. Now, at the top of the psychiatric chain, Canadian Psychiatric Association, the American Psychiatric Association, they know very well what these websites.
Oh, they're the people running it.
Yeah, they're the ones who started a lot of the MK Ultra programs that have advanced to where we're at now. Now, at the local level, where you're being maybe mandated to see a psychiatrist, they probably are largely ignorant of the technology. But unfortunately, no matter how much proof these victims put in front of psychiatrists, they're not looking at anything.
Well, that's the question. How do you tell, because you've always been in contact about real schizophrenics then, how do you tell somebody who's crazy versus somebody who...
Well, the bottom line is schizophrenia usually starts at an early age. Most of the victims that I'm talking to can pinpoint the time their stalking started and their hearing voices started, and typically it's late 30s, early 40s. You just don't see that with schizophrenia. Schizophrenia is usually 18 to 28 in a male. It can be a little bit later in a female. So now what's happening is a lot of these victims are being diagnosed with delusional disorder or psychosis, otherwise specified, which means you've got something going on and we don't know what it is. On top of that, the medications won't treat this.
Dr. Rowney killed.
And then Paul Bard said that also note that in conjunction with subliminal and visual technologies as well as role playing, those technologies can be used for trickery, including apparent schizophrenic episodes, so-called alien encounters, and much more.
Inner voice cloning.
When you go and tell people that you're hearing voices, we've been patterned to turnkey see that as schizophrenia and not even look to see if there's a legitimate source for it. If I put a voice in your head that's in your voice, and if you pattern a thought, like I tell some of these victims, when you read a book, you're actually hearing your own voice in your head as you read. If I put that voice in your head, then that becomes a thought, and you'll act on those thoughts.
Voice cloning. Voice transformation. Dr. Robert Duncan. Voice transformation.
Voice transformation. How do you fool somebody on the phone? And in fact, this was used in the Gulf War. They called up the generals, used voice transformation, so it sounded like there are other generals giving orders to the commanders in the field, and they fooled them where to go.
Chris Burden. Voice transformation.
In other cases, they've used voice transformation technology to make me think that ex-colleagues of mine are involved. And that was particularly scary because for a period of months, they made me believe, tried to make me believe, that my ex-colleague of mine from CompuCom Systems, a very important person there, was brought into the torture to try to help me get through it.
So, Duncan, I have one more question for you, and this is probably one of the most important questions I'm going to have for you. Recently, I've experienced something that can possibly get me murdered, and this is something that throughout the years I know they've been working on. I don't know if it took 30 years for them to finally get me, to be able to do exactly what I'm about to try to explain, but forced speech. I mean, I could be literally sitting here having a conversation with you, and it's not me talking. Literally I am saying word for word, verbatim, not what I'm being told, but what I feel is going through me.
Yeah.
I mean, it's crazy. I mean, I could be trying to tell you, Duncan, hey, do you see that cute girl over there? Next thing you know, I'm talking about the guy down the street is,
Yeah, so the way you experience it would be, I guess, like Tourette's. Almost like you can't control what is coming out of your mouth. And it's not what's in your thought processes, but you're speaking somebody else's verbiage. And yes, it does take a long time for that usually to occur, because remember, your brain's been mapped out.
Mm-hmm.
And so they've mapped out your audio cortex. You're cloned with another person or a machine. And so pretty soon the brain will bypass your cerebral cortex and be able to shoot out vocabulary that you have no intention of saying. And it's, I hate to say it, it's pretty common with most TIs.
So
research.
I'm not the only TI who's
No, not even close. No, there are a lot of them. There are a lot of them. This is not new, not a new phenomenon. And in fact, that's where the term forced speech came from. It's probably back in the 80s. People in...
Wait a minute. So you're saying that they've been working on forced speech since the 80s?
Yeah.
This is 2015.
I know. So you can imagine how advanced the weapon systems have become.
Chris Burden, forced speech.
I was in Palo Alto, and they were revealing all of these technologies, forced speech, and they do it in gradual steps, because they're always trying to make you think that you've been exposed to everything the technology can do, but you never are. They're revealing these things in graduated steps so they can maximize the terror and the fear in you. So imagine sitting there one day and then someone just starts speaking through you. And that's what happened to me. I was just sitting there in my house in Palo Alto, the place that I was renting a room in, and all of a sudden the voice said, "Hi, Chris, this is Joe." And it was my cousin Joe's voice coming through me. And it was lower than I speak. And while they went through the forced speech, they demonstrated how it can lower your voice an octave or more, lower than how you normally speak. So that's what these technologies can do, and they can manipulate you in all sorts of different ways. The voice transformation is incredible. I mean, they can make you speak with this kind of electronic, almost synthesized sounding voice. So, it's an output that they are then, sending through you, transmitting through you. Mm-hmm. So when you're going through this, you think in analog terms. You think about electronic, electric, nerve impulses. But what they're doing is much more sophisticated than that.
Holograms, visions.
So they can make you see ETs, see dead relatives, and you don't know if it's done with mind control or if it is real. And that's why they are confusing it, because there are absolutely real contacts with ETs and real contacts with the energy of the dead, but they can also be simulated by mind control, and people can be confused.
Thoughts and feelings.
Thought Transmission Unit sends modulated electromagnetic wave beams to human receiver to influence thoughts and actions without an electronic receiver. This one filed back in 2002. A thought transmission unit sends modulated electromagnetic wave beams over long distances to a human receiver to influence the thoughts, actions, or perceptions of the organism, with or without their consent, but without them requiring electronic receiver. This is absolutely phenomenal technology being filed for patents back in 2002. Moving on, we have electronic fringe field generator for manipulating nervous systems, filed back in 1998. Apparatus and method for manipulating the nervous system of a subject through afferent nerves modulated by externally applied weak fluctuating electronic fields tuned to certain frequencies, such as to excite a resonance in neural circuits. Depending on the frequency chosen, excitation of such resonance causes in human subjects relaxation, sleeplessness, sexual excitement, or the slowing of certain cortical processes. So again, this is quite literally using these frequencies to affect our nervous system in such a way that will make us feel various feelings depending on what they tune these frequencies into and how they want you to feel.
When they blast electromagnetic fields, so it goes through all of Europe.
And do you think that's a form of mind control?
Oh, it can be used for mind control, of course, like HARP. And that is the danger, because people know nothing about mind control. They don't know that your thoughts can be changed, your attitudes, your feelings. If you love somebody sitting at a computer, even through satellites, can say, okay, let's make it opposite. And you start just detesting the person who you love. You can't be in the same room, you feel uncomfortable. I think this is terrible, because you're making people into biological robots.
Yeah.
Why?
Access to high-level government stuff. The question is, why are they doing it? Or is it, what's the point?
From after the book came out, and then now after talking to about 5,000 or 6,000 other victims, and globally and here, it appears to be experimental.
Like the harassment is being done as a larger form of experimentation. If you look back at the original mind control studies of MK Ultra and MK Search, the victims were almost always nobodies that lacked the financial or political clout to do anything about the victimization. Mind control research has been ongoing in this country by all of the intelligence agencies and the DoD since the 50s. Advances in technology, satellite technology, and RF technology have allowed the lab to be taken out of the laboratory and into society. The long-term goal, we feel, of this targeting is to see what the mass effects are on a large group of population, with probably an eventual use of this technology on a global population for control.
What not to do?
Things that a target probably shouldn't do once they realize they're being targeted is try to convince people of your targeting that are already non-believers. The whole goal of targeting is to eventually get you in front of a psychiatrist to draw a schizophrenic or delusional diagnosis. What most of the human rights organizations are recommending now is that if you feel you're being targeted, first try to communicate to them to get pointers and advice on who you can talk to and who you shouldn't. As stated before, one of the main goals with this targeting is to get you to call the police over and over with complaints that can't be proven, which will eventually land you in front of a psychiatrist who usually won't listen to or look at any of the research or articles you bring in, but will be looking to give you a psychiatric diagnosis. Once that diagnosis is given, typically the police won't respond to any further targeting, which may escalate after you're diagnosed.
What we can do about it?
We can do about it. Number one is awareness. As long as people don't know, they can be just slaughtered silently with silent weapons of war.
Incoming voice.